What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for Your Overwatch, and with the World Cup on, if any of you have caught it, you'd know that there's been a ton of blowouts. And as we also know, in our matchmaking games, oftentimes matches can be blowouts one way or the other as well. Blowouts are here to stay, guys, and I think it's important that we understand as viewers and as players the ins and outs of them. So let's clear some of this up here today. One, why is there so many blowouts in the World Cup? Well, first and foremost, the obvious answer is some teams have more pro players than the others, but that's nothing special, everybody knows that. But what that does remind us is one core aspect of Overwatch, that the basics can win. I would go as far to say as the majority of lower ranked matchmaking games are won on the basics, either mechanics, positioning, or timing. Whichever team enacts the most effective nuts and bolts of the game, just mechanically walking up to an engagement and hitting shots. On whatever character we're talking about, I'm not just talking about DPS mechanics either, but the team that does those things better is just going to win. But on the subject of mechanics, the thing that we have to realize about Overwatch heroes is that there's massive jumps in output based upon your mechanical mastery of a character. And I'll try to describe this based upon two heroes that are a bit underrepresented in their mechanical performance. So like one, Winston, often a character that's thrown some shade as if he has no mechanical ability, but I assure you, there's a big difference between a Winston who can successfully land his jump, hit the melee before he lands, and perfectly track whatever character it is he's going after. What I just described is like the biggest play Winston can make. But for whatever reason, if you're unable to mechanically perform that action, say for instance, you can't track the Genji perfectly and he dashes away, well, the difference between him dying immediately when you have him in your grasp and him getting away is the difference between you being effective and not as good as a player who's mastered the character. Another example is Lucio, who oftentimes gets a rap as if his mechanics don't matter, but that simply just isn't true. The better mechanics you have, the more damage you're going to land, and if you have almost perfect accuracy with Lucio, you're better than some damage characters in terms of your output. Not to mention the skill set of being able to escape where other Lucios can't, being able to wall ride in the action and get to relevant places, go on and on and on. Overwatch fans understand this individually when we learn a character, how dense a character can be, and we start to appreciate what they really can accomplish, but this incredibly vast difference in output of characters that aren't even necessarily deemed carry roles is part of the reason why you start to see this massive difference in performance either at the World Cup or in matchmaking games. If one player, for whatever reason, is performing at that level where they're outputting a lot, even on a role that you don't necessarily deem to be the carry position, all of a sudden that character is providing value that's really hard to keep up with, and before long, team fights spiral out of control and one team drastically wins them. And speaking of spiraling out of control, the nature of Overwatch is to spiral things out of control. Oftentimes you see engagements that are either very clearly one way or another. And the reason for that is, we're dealing with a game that have superheroes in them. Powers in Overwatch aren't subtle at all, and when you combine powers together to create a strategy, it even more so becomes entrenched, making it more common that setups, plays, team comps can be very boom or bust, which is partially why the meta revolves around characters and strategies that are the most stable, the ones that are the most adaptable. And it really will never be the case where we see a character like Bastion be meta unless he's overpowered. He's too sharp of an edge of a character. He's either going to do really well or get hard countered, and there's not really a way to balance him in a way where he commonly can be useful a big percentage of the time. But this principle also extends to maps because we're leveraging characters with super abilities. It turns positioning and different parts of map design to also be emboldened to either be an extreme strength or potentially an extreme weakness. And a problem that players in matchmaking, which also extends to the World Cup because some of them are matchmaking players and not even pro players competing at the World Cup, is that if you don't know or learn these many minor win conditions, either how to beat a certain strategy, a certain character, a certain aspect of a map, when the enemy is using X, Y, or Z strategy or character, you can flamboyantly lose and look like you don't even have a chance. But it all hinges on navigating around these very intense styles of play, and once you learn to grapple with that idea, I think that's where a lot of the fun in Overwatch is. But the failure in Overwatch comes harsh and heavy, because if you don't learn or adapt or adjust as a team, how the team is approaching a situation, even in games where the teams are evenly matched, you can see blowouts. And I have mentioned this in a previous video, but the map design in the game in general has different scales of difficulty through the different points. And based upon how like the first fight goes, dictates the ultimate economy for the rest of the map as well. With that being the case, if you get stalled out in the streets phase of a payload, it isn't too much different than stalled out at first. Now, of course, you want as much distance as you can, but the point is, streets phase is almost a given to have some progress in it if you're able to take first at all. First is way harder than getting progress on streets on just about every map. So even maps can be deceiving, because sometimes you'll see an instance where a defense will hold a team on third and then fail to cap first themselves, and you might say, well, that's a blowout. The enemy team have 3 points, you didn't even get 1. But in reality, the hurdle that they had to jump over of getting first is way harder than matching getting the cart to third, if that makes sense. Once you get over that first hurdle, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to take the easier fights in front of you to get it close to that third point wherever it ended up. I know this can get really confusing, guys, but Overwatch as a game is confusing, and knowing this is important for whatever type of player you are, whether you're trying to make sense of the World Cup, or if you're playing in matchmaking and you're unsure what's going on when you're getting blown out. Some players start to just throw immediately when they're getting blown out, not realizing that the comeback mechanics are designed in a way for you to be able to do the same back. If you want to know more about that, you can check out my video on the comeback mechanics. To conclude, it is a bit unfortunate that Overwatch is built this way, where the traditional means of scoring maps in an esports game means that, at least in my opinion, in most group stages, you are going to have these blowouts when we're talking about the World Cup. There's some teams and players that are competing against players that are significantly better mechanically across the board than them, meaning that coming close to even winning a team fight is a bit of a stretch. Granted, I'll be the first to tell you that you can utilize ult economy to win team fights, but the problem is pro players are already good at that as well. But the good news is, if you are watching the World Cup, is that I think when we go to BlizzCon to have the playoffs, there's going to be some sensational matches, because so many of the teams that made it through are so skilled, so that we can get back to more even competition in the World Cup. The interesting thing is, even then, there still might be blowouts, perhaps not undefeated sweeps, but maps will definitely be blowouts, but it will be more of an even playing field blowout, where you at least can get past that mechanical hump. When the mechanics of the players are on a bit more of an even footing, then we can start to see the other aspects of the game shine. And I really look forward to those games. Let me know what matches you're excited about in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please subscribe, because we upload each and every day, so you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link in the description, you can check out our Twitter and our Discord server, where you can interact with our community and find teammates to pair up with. That's been it for me. It's been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.